All right, I think I'm ready to start. You can hear me? Dobre utro. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time at Drupal Dev Days. I'm Suzanne Dergacheva, co-founder of Evolving Web, so a Drupal agency. It's been around for 16 years. And also, I lead the Promote Drupal initiative, so if you like to talk about marketing, I would love to chat with you about that at some point during these days. And actually, one of the roles I've played in Drupal over the many years that I've enjoyed the most is as a trainer. So I taught a Drupal training program for about 10 years. I traveled around teaching people Drupal. And one of the really fun things about that is that I got to talk to people who are encountering Drupal for the first time. And I'm sure you've all had this happen where you've been in the situation where you have to describe what is Drupal, right? Everybody's been there. What is this Drupal thing you do as part of your job? And when I talk to these real newcomers who are encountering Drupal for the first time, usually they are going to be they're going to be content editors. So I say, well, Drupal is a content management system, and I describe it in those terms. I talk to them about, the interface. So Drupal is this. This is what you're going to see. This is what I'm going to describe to you. Drupal is content management. But if I'm talking to a client, because I also wear this other hat where I run a Drupal shop, how many of you here are sort of like play a leadership role maybe in a Drupal company? How many of you have been in a sales pitch for Drupal? You've had to talk this other talk like, oh, Drupal is this solution to your problem. And we start using words like digital experience platform, which you might love or hate. Drupal is that composable CMS. This is what we're talking about now. It's still CMS, but it's so much more. And that's another way to talk about Drupal. And when I put on my Promote Drupal marketing hat, I can say, here's this great slide deck where you can describe this to the clients. So that's another answer to the question, what is Drupal? And then all of us deep down at our core, we really are motivated by Drupal being open source. We're motivated by this, being here together. We like to talk about Drupal as a community. It's a bit harder to describe what that means and why that's valuable to people. Some folks don't get it until they're actually at an event like this. But I think that's deep down what inspires a lot of us and what we try to capture. But today, for the purposes of this little presentation, I would like to talk about Drupal as a platform. And I don't mean platform like the DXP thing, and I don't mean platform like a framework. I actually want to propose talking about Drupal as a platform in terms of being a type of marketplace. I've been reading this book called Platform Revolution. And it describes a platform as a model of business like Uber or Airbnb that it can outcompete other businesses, disrupting a market with the technology in new ways. And it's something that connects people providing a service or product with consumers. So we have vendors, we have consumers. We have these two sides of the equation. And it's not just one company acting as we are producing this product, but rather it's connecting people who are producing and building things or creating value with people who are consuming it. So I think that thinking about Drupal in this way as being this whole market, this whole marketplace for, yes, websites, yes, applications, but also all the people involved in it, all the companies involved in it. I think that this can really help us understand some potential for Drupal and how Drupal can innovate and how Drupal can do better at living up to our expectations of open source and the Open Web Manifesto. So this is my one slide that looks like this, and I'm just not going to fill you with 30 minutes of economics graphs, and hopefully you can see it okay here. But I want to describe what I mean by platform a little bit more. So when we think about like a marketplace, essentially Drupal is this whole economic system. Like why do we get to do this as part of our jobs? It's because There are sellers. So the sellers are agencies. The sellers are developers. The sellers are the people creating the value, building things. And then there are buyers, so people, end users, people who need websites, content editors, the people who really benefit from having their website, having their app, having their whole tech stack on Drupal. And unlike a business where it's just me making websites for my clients, actually, for me, the more people there are selling and the more people there are buying, it's better for me, and it's actually better for everyone in the whole system. As a Drupal, an agency offering Drupal services, if I was the only one doing it, then nobody would see the value of the fact that I'm offering a Drupal website. People would just say, oh, well, that's, why do you even have a name for that? That's just your own CMS. So I need to have other vendors, other agencies doing the same thing. And at the same time as an end user, so if, I don't know, is Burgas Free University using Drupal?
I think Bobby Fu uses it.
So lots of universities use Drupal, right? And they benefit from the fact that all the other universities, or a lot of other universities use it, because then they have a better set of tools. There's more incentive for people to create tools that are helpful for universities for their website. So we're all benefiting in this ecosystem from having more people. And so this is analogous to some other platforms that we're all familiar with, right? Like who here is using some kind Uber or some kind of app for finding a driver? Yeah, I don't have Uber on my phone, but I still get in an Uber sometimes. And of course, if there were no other people using Uber, buying those services, there would be no platform. If there were no drivers, there would be no platform. And the more drivers there are, the more passengers there are, actually it makes the platform better for all the users. So platforms bring value by connecting users. It sounds very nice. And so to think about this story from well, my story with Drupal is I started an agency in 2007, 2008. We started using Drupal, and right away we had clients actually prompting us and saying, well, I need a multilingual website, so I think the best solution is Drupal. Can you build me a Drupal website? And at the same time, we would go to Drupal events, and people were very confident that, like, yes, of course, Drupal can build these big enterprise kind of sites. You can build small sites, you can build big sites. Here's the whole range of things you can do with it. And so it inspired a lot of confidence. And so for a brand new developer, I was just a couple years out of university, still learning a lot, it gave me a lot of confidence. And I think of this as being analogous to other platforms that kind of give a newcomer a chance to start a whole career path. So as a platform, Drupal enables this. It's not just, I'm going to learn this technology, PHP, all on my own. You have a whole community around you. You have this whole platform providing not just the technology, but also the system for finding work. By saying, I offer Drupal services, you're more likely to be able to find buyers. So platforms kind of have these different qualities. Connecting people. And as you'll notice, all of these things, building connection, facilitating exchange, governance, a lot of this is actually supported by the Drupal Association. And so I'll talk about later how that plays in. So I'll walk through kind of how Drupal fits this definition of platform. How does this all function? What does Drupal being a platform actually mean? So when we have consumers and producers in a economic marketplace, there's this gap of skill, or this gap of knowledge. There's this thing that the consumers need. And with Drupal, that tends to be the fact that there's a knowledge gap between the people who need the website and the team of experts, a lot of us in the room here, who can build them that website, right? And so we need something that bridges that gap and something that shows the consumer, here are the people who can do that for you. Here's a place you can see what's on offer. And so bridging that gap for Drupal, we have things like the marketplace on Drupal.org. We have events, maybe not so much of this event, that's not the focus, but things like DrupalCon. We have training events where people can learn and people can find experts. And on a lot of other platforms, this connection is purely through an app. So if we think about Spotify or other apps that you're probably using that are platforms, you never actually get to meet the artist, right? You're just connecting to their music and getting the value through the app itself. Whereas for us in the Drupal community, we do have in-person events. We do have other ways to connect. But Drupal.org still plays this crucial role in connecting folks. We also use Drupal.org a lot to facilitate exchange of information. So information on Drupal.org, yes, we're sharing ideas, we're doing development, but we're also picking up clues of who knows what, who are the people who have the expertise. Other platforms tend to have something really explicit, like a rating system. Like on eBay, you would never buy something from a seller if they didn't have a good rating. You probably wouldn't want to stay in an Airbnb apartment if it didn't have at least a 4-star rating. You'd think that there was something wrong with it, right? So we're using a platform, and so Drupal.org has lots of other functions, but one of its functions is just to show who are all the people in this marketplace. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. And then the third function or the third thing that makes a platform is that it creates governance conditions. So it's sort of the platform is the thing that holds the keys to who can do what, who can play in the game, who can play in the market. And we have a really strong culture in Drupal of having core committers, having a security team, having governance over the code base. But in terms of who can actually create an account on Drupal.org or who can be a buyer, who can be a seller, this we are extremely lax, right? Like anybody can create an account, and that's sort of the nature of open source. So we don't really have basic conditions for participating in the market. And this is something that really makes Drupal, I'd say, different from other platforms, because most platforms have some kind of level of, like, to become an Uber driver, you need to have a driver's license, and often, checking IDs and basic things like this. So what can all that, thinking about Drupal as a platform, what can that actually teach us, and how can it help us do better? So I'll yeah, too small. I'm gonna move on to the next slide. So I'll use an example of Drupal your iPhone. So an example of a platform like the iPhone that provides value. So if you think of like traditional phone, how is the iPhone better than a traditional phone? There's some functionality that's built into just the phone itself. It has a better camera, has a bigger screen that you can type on. But a lot of the value comes from the fact that there are all these apps on the phone. So a lot of the growth of the platform, a lot of the success of the phone and the platform itself, is that there's an app store, and it's not just one company creating all the functionality for all the apps on your device. There's a marketplace around it. So it's a very in a real sense, a marketplace. And there are developers on one side who are the producers, and there are the consumers who are using their iPhones and downloading apps. And the more apps that are available, the more developers there are going to be who are going to want to develop apps for the phone. The market for them is going to be bigger. At the same time, the more people using the phone, the more people downloading apps, the more the developers are going to be motivated because they can build more value. So growing the market helps consumers and producers, and actually having more competition, more developers, is good for the other developers as well. And in this case, the App Store has, as I think a lot of us have real-world experience with, this strong governance over releasing apps and what the rules are for playing in the market. And so for us, in our in our domain for websites, having one person or one company that made your website, which is how a company like mine would have functioned, in the 90s, or like when we very first started, our first maybe few months in business before we discovered Drupal and WordPress and Ruby on Rails and all the other things we could offer. We were just individuals, lonely developers creating websites. The fact that we are using Drupal and being supported by the whole community of developers, and that we have other people doing the same thing, means that not only are we benefiting from all those other developers, but just by the fact that we're using Drupal, we are contributing back to it, and even from the first project, making everybody's websites function better. And so the benefit of this model for the consumer, you might end up on day one with a better website, because of course having a ton of developers looking at code is going to increase the quality. But I think more tangibly to the consumer, then there's also this built-in potential to extend the platform. So we can think of things like, there's a module for that. Consumers love that. The more people that are developing on Drupal, the more modules that are going to be available, the more customizations people can make and possibilities that they feel they can tap into. So using Drupal just means more than just having a better product. It actually means subscribing to a product that's backed by a community. And this means we can scale up better. We can produce more websites as a larger group. And so this explains why people at Drupal conferences are so willing to share things like, this is my hourly rate, or here's the modules I use to build a website. Because we just have this feeling that it's better to share the information. It's of course more in the open source spirit, but then tangibly, when we think about the economics of it, it's actually better that we have competitors. If I showed up to a Drupal conference one day and half my competitors weren't there, it wouldn't be better for my business in the long term. It would be much harder for us. I think one key to the success has been tooling like Drupal.org that really has lowered the barrier to entry in the past to getting new producers producing. It was so innovative. It helped new developers onboard and see, here's all the information, here's kind of the ability to learn so quickly through what other people are doing, exchange information. But of course, there have been challenges, right? So as a platform, not just as a product, but really this whole market that I'm talking about, it's faced some scalability issues, some issues over time. So I'll just mention three little things. First of all, a lot of the work that we do in Drupal requires humans to scale up. So maybe there's a technology, like our platform is Drupal.org, but Drupal.org doesn't just run itself. It's greased by mentors and people facilitating contribution. People like Gabor, when I started, Angie Byron, lots of other folks, and there's a real culture behind it. Culture can scale, but human scaling is more challenging, right? Having these people to run the platform, to make it all work. We've also had things like releasing Drupal 8, huge architectural changes to Drupal, introduction of Symfony and object-oriented programming, and a big focus on the developer experience. So there's this idea that, like, let's make Drupal as a product better to get more developers in. So that works in terms of the equation. We want more developers. More developers should mean, we're bigger production capacity, means we can have more consumers. But things have to be in balance. If the consumers kind of feel left out, then we're going to have a mismatch in the market. So like this big change with Drupal 8 kind of made end users, I think, kind of feel like they were paying a lot to get the same thing. I had a lot of clients say, you want me to pay how much? And the website's going to look exactly the same, right? So people judge a book by its cover. Even people who think that they're technically minded, they're still going to just look at the visual results to see if a project is successful. And I think, in a sense, it teaches us that we have to think what's good for Drupal as a product objectively. Having object-oriented code in Drupal, like, yeah, my computer science brain says, of course, that means it's going to be better. But having a smaller user base is not good for Drupal. And having people leave the whole marketplace is not good for Drupal, even if the product comes out on top. And then I think another big challenge is that a lot of what we call Drupal as a platform, like Drupal.org, the events that facilitate this exchange between producers and consumers, it's run by the Drupal Association in large part, and that's a tiny organization. So it makes it hard to have things like better governance or to really explicitly work on increasing these effects of growing Drupal on the consumer side and the producer side. Okay, so what does all this mean for the future? Like, what can we do? So who here has heard about the Drupal certification program? You might have like seen it flash by in your newsletters. I think one thing that can increase consumer trust or consumer just feeling like they know what's going on and they know who the producers are is to have a certification program. It's nice in the short term for me to be the only one competing in Drupal and say, oh, I'm the only certified partner in Canada. We love writing that in proposals and pitching people and saying, yeah, we're certified. Not that many other people are. But really long term, it's better for everyone if we have lots of people who are certified. So if you can tell people, I'm going to build you a website on Drupal, and Drupal has a certification plan, and there's tons of other people who can support your website that are also certified, that gives people a lot of confidence that they have a platform that that's well supported. And so yeah, this is going to intentionally bring more people in. And people love awards. People love getting like recognized, Splash Awards. People love saying, yeah, Drupal, and here's what we're, this market has been, or this need has been kind of filled. Like Splash Awards is an initiative that came up. A lot of orgs like Acquia and Pantheon have their awards that they give out. But just being able to give the consumers an easy way to say, yeah, there's people doing Drupal and they're doing great things, and if they're certified or award-winning, people really like that in a market. Just like we like taking a Airbnb and knowing it's going to be a 5-star Airbnb. And then initiatives like Starshot, right? This really lowers the barrier to entry for consumers. You want to make it easier for consumers. You just want more of them. We just need to increase numbers. And so this is one of the key ways to do that. And as developers, we might think, oh, well, Starshot, that's for just the end users who are maybe more, they're not looking for my services. They don't need my custom development services. But actually, people who might benefit from Starshot actually could play a lot of different roles. Like if we think of somebody who works for a major pharmaceutical company and uses Drupal as a framework for thousands of websites, and then they go on to do a startup and they need a website for their startup, they could use Starshot for that startup. Or later on, maybe they scale up their startup and their business partner who hadn't used Drupal before, they had been exposed to Starshot, they saw how great it was, and maybe that business partner goes on to use Drupal later in their career. So something like Starshot, just getting more people into the market, even if they're not the big buyers or the people who really need the custom dev that we love doing, they're growing that market of consumers, and it's going to have this network effect of more knowledge and more usage of Drupal, which could be a long-term strategy, paying off more over years. Also, something like Drupal.org redesign, lowering the barrier to entry. And this lowers the barrier to entry, I think, like changing the UX, changing the design. It's going to lower the barrier to entry for both consumers and producers. So people who are consuming, of course, they want to come to Drupal.org and have a good impression and know that the tool they're going to use is the right one for the job. But also for producers like us, if we make Drupal.org better and we have something that more clearly resembles a dev portal, that's a better developer experience. So redesigning Drupal.org with a brand, giving confidence, but also really totally revamping the UX and maybe saying, no, this should be 2 websites. Make it easier to recruit new developers. And then I have a couple other little ideas that are maybe smaller, just seeds. Because the first 3 things I mentioned are actually projects underway. So one idea is that we just need a frictionless way to get new people into the market. Like the market for Drupal has, the platform, the marketplace, the number of producers and consumers is probably shrunk, right? And we need to pick that up. We need to get it growing. So how do we just make it frictionless to get new people into the market? And so we want to make it so that newbies just have a way of joining and engaging without even thinking about it. So if we think of a platform like Google Search, when Google launched its search product, people didn't even know that they were contributing to that platform when they were building their website that linked to other websites. But by creating those links, they were actually teaching teaching Google, this is which websites are important. And so we want to have a way that people can be part of Drupal almost without even thinking about it. So is it having a demo they can watch so they don't have to download Drupal, or a funnel of welcoming emails that are going to kind of onboard them on the platform. Something that's just such an easy entryway that doesn't require technical knowledge or effort. And then finally, making it easy to switch sides. So this is something interesting if you look at other platforms. If you look at something like Airbnb, they're constantly, they have hosts and they have travelers. So they have the 2 sides of their market, right? The hosts are the producers and the travelers are the consumers. And one way to grow the market is just to turn more travelers into hosts. So say, rather than just traveling around and staying in Airbnbs, why don't you rent out your apartment while you're gone, while you're traveling? Or Uber drivers, right? Like you have people who are already taking Uber, and then why don't you become a driver? So in Drupal, how do we turn end users into developers and developers into end users. So how do we get people to use Drupal throughout their career as they switch sides? I know lots of people who have worked for agencies, then they maybe go work for on the client side. Similarly, someone might use Drupal as part of their hobby or in their free time, and then they end up making it a career, but they're switching sides and that they're going from being a producer to consumer. And how do we encourage that and enable more of that? I'm not sure what the answer is, but I would love to hear thoughts. So just a couple closing ideas, and I know we're out of time. But this whole idea of platform really has these two sides to it: consumer, producer. We want more of everything, but it also kind of begs the question of who's driving the platform. Are we trying to create a platform that's driven by developers or driven by UX? So something like Starshot really makes it feel like, oh yeah, Drupal needs to be more driven by the user experience. At the same time, we know that developer experience is important, and Drupal's invested a lot. And I'd like the answer to this question to kind of be both. We want Drupal to be driven. I think it's been largely successful because it has been a developer-led project. When I got into Drupal, I really had that sense that it was, so much better architected than WordPress, which I had been using before, and that made me really want to use it. And that's going to lead to more motivated developers who are working hard. But we can't ignore the fact that our marketplace needs end users. So we have to balance this equation, and then think just about how we can grow this whole platform. And we can't always prioritize the product over the platform. Sometimes we have to make tough choices. And just overall, the Drupal platform is more valuable than the product. If you think about just how much is Drupal worth, I think in the last, I think at DrupalCon, someone threw out a number. I don't remember what it was, but it's like, what's the value of the whole market of Drupal? It's huge. But if you took the Drupal product and somehow magically said, oh, it's no longer open source, it's just belonging to this one company, the value would drop because it wouldn't have the whole platform around it. You would lose all that benefit and all of that value. And a lot of this value is riding on the Drupal community, the Drupal Association, and Drupal.org itself as our platform. And I think just in general, I've always felt in Drupal like it's helped me avoid a mindset of scarcity. I always come to Drupal events and just feel like, oh yeah, there's so much work to do. There's so many projects. There's so many people as part of this community. And I love working in Drupal because of that. And I think for all of us, we like working in an environment where we feel like growing the platform, growing the community is going to benefit everyone. So I hope you found these thoughts interesting, and I would love to continue the conversation. Feel free to email me or hit me up on Slack. I'm Pixelite on Slack and Drupal.org. And of course, come chat with me later on in the conference.
Thank you, Susan. We have started a little bit later, so we have some time for questions.
Oh, you do? Okay. Sorry.
Maybe we don't have questions, I don't know.
Or comments, or just, you're wrong. Tell me.
Hi. I've been a long-time Drupal core contributor, but I have never looked at it, like you said in the first slide, like a network platform. So it's a new idea for me. Thank you for that.
Great, I'm glad.
More questions, comments?
think a big thing that you mentioned in the beginning is the extra time and money that people need to invest to have their site being redone in Drupal 8. We're getting kind of past that point a bit, although not fully with Drupal 7 end of life. Is the Drupal Association also looking into that? Because Starshot is one big way that we're going to make it easier to set up a site, but is there other things being looked into why the sites were that much more costly? Was it inexperience with object-oriented programming and Symfony in the community, or to make sure we don't have the same issues going forward?
Yeah, so the question is about, was there sort of research done into the reasons that people dropped off Drupal when Drupal 8 came out? I think the story isn't over yet, because people are still I'm still working on migration projects from Drupal 7 to Drupal 10 now. So I think it's yet to be seen exactly. But certainly there were a lot of people building Drupal 7 sites that just maybe didn't value their site enough to invest in migrating. Especially at first, I think the migrations took a long time because people didn't have experience with it. For our team, I know the first migration projects we did were not as efficient as the last ones. So that means the first people doing it told the story of, this is hard and expensive, and then that story kind of gets propagated. And then certainly for some organizations that were, if you have a single developer, a lot of people I train, for example, on Drupal would be a team of one managing a whole Drupal site. And if they know Drupal, but they don't yet know Drupal 8, and they're not like a seasoned developer who has all this other experience, yes, then like the architectural changes, the fact that Drupal 8 just felt so different and required training would have been maybe a blocker for them to move over without training being available. So one thing I've heard a lot since then is that we need more training for my team. Like when I respond to proposals where I have to pitch a content management system or pitch a whole, I'm competing against WordPress or Adobe or whatever. One of the things that's often asked is, what are the training options available for my team? Because people have developers already and they want to train them up on the solution. So that could also have been something that caused a drop-off.